This week's Piltch Point with Avram Piltch is proudly powered by PureVPN. When you're browsing online, you want to protect your anonymity, whether it be from Facebook and Google or from your ISP. And the best way to do that is with a VPN like PureVPN. It allows you to obfuscate your online activity, and it allows you to report that you're somewhere else. So if you're out of the country and it's been a year, right? And the series finale of your favorite show is happening back in the U.S. You can still watch your Hulu or wherever you happen to have it, which is great. And of course, we've got some deals right now. If you sign up for 2 years, you get it for $3.33 a month, and there is a 31-day money-back guarantee. So if you try it out and you're like, you know what, this just isn't for me, they'll give you your money back. But I use it myself and can tell you that it is a great product. To find out more about it, you can go to pilchpoint.live/PureVPN. All right, Avram. So we got some processor news, right?
Yes. So Intel just came out with their new Comet Lake-S CPUs, which are their latest desktop processors. And we had, at Tom's Hardware, had the opportunity to thoroughly test and review the top-of-the-line Core i9 10900K CPU. They also have other CPUs that we will be publishing reviews of, including a Core i7, a Core i5, and a Core i3. But let's talk a bit about the Core i9 10900K. So this processor now is selling for $530 or so. It is the fastest gaming processor ever made. If you're going to play a game, this definitely will help boost your frame rates. Now, take a step back. Most people are better off spending the extra money on a better graphics card than spending more for the CPU, because the graphics card has a lot more to do with performance than the CPU does. And when you get above a certain level of resolution and performance, most of the difference between one computer and another is the graphics card. So you might be better off, you're probably almost certainly better off if you're limiting your budget to get a lower, to either get an AMD processor that may have more cores and threads and be cheaper, or a Core i7 processor. So we're not saying this is the best processor for people. It just happens to be synthetically definitely gets a little bit faster results when all things being equal on gaming. Now, the Core i9 10900K is interesting because, or maybe not as interesting as it could be, because it is yet another Intel CPU generation that is made with a 14 nanometer process. Now let's take a step back for those who aren't familiar with what process nodes are, because it is very confusing, I think, even to people who talk about them. The process node is a number of nanometers, and nanometers so small none of us can really see it. I think it's the theoretical distance between the transistors, and if you if you have less nanometers in your process, that means that you can fit more transistors in a tighter space, and you can generate less heat and less power consumption, because you're able to, I guess, pack things closer together. Now, Intel has to be fair, nobody is actually taking out, I don't know what type of microscope you would need and what type of really tiny ruler you would need, and measuring the nanometers of chips. But we know that AMD has been since last year using a 7 nanometer process. Intel has been on 14 nanometers for 5-6 years now, something like that. They've been on it for many years. And while they have 10 nanometer processors in a few laptops, they have their problems with getting down to lower nanometers, to what we call a die shrink, have been legendary. I mean, they have a lot of issues. So now we're still on 14 nanometers, where Intel is, where AMD is on 7, and some of the graphics vendors are going lower, and so are ARM processors like Qualcomm. So it's not good that they're basically rewarming the same processor node with a lot of the same stuff. And so how do they get it to be faster? Because they want to keep coming out with new processors. They want to give people a reason to buy new stuff. And the industry really needs Intel to come out with new processors, if we're to be honest, because companies don't come out with new computers as often if they don't have new processors to sell in them. Like, it becomes an occasion for companies to say, oh, now I'm going to come out with it. Now, these are desktop processors we're talking about here in Comet Lake-S, but they, a lot of time when it's laptop processors, you just won't see a lot of laptop refreshes until they know that Intel is coming out with new stuff. And I think this is true also to an extent of new desktops, obviously new motherboards. So, the whole industry kind of moves along with Intel, and to some extent with AMD, but Intel still controls a lot more market share. So, the tech industry needs Intel to come out with new stuff, and they keep coming out with it, but it has to be, because they've had so many problems getting past 14 nanometers, they have to find incremental ways to turn up the performance. And those incremental ways are adding more CPU cores. So now the Core i9 10900K has 10 cores, whereas last year's model, the 9900K, had 8 cores. And by turning up the clock speed. Now this one out of the box, I believe runs at 4.9 gigahertz on all cores, and can boost up to, under the right cooling conditions, you really have to have a fancy cooler for this, but without overclocking at all, can boost up to 5.3 gigahertz, which is incredibly fast. And the news was out this week that an overclocker already was able to get the Core i9 10900K up to 7.7 gigahertz, which is great. But when I say that an overclocker was able to do that, I mean somebody who was doing it for competition, not for actually using it like that, because you might be able to get it up a few hundred megahertz at if you're going to use it all the time, like that, at that speed. But when we talk about somebody boosting the clock speed on something by like 2 to 2.5 gigahertz like that, they're using liquid nitrogen. And so you're not going to, and you have to re-pour the liquid nitrogen on it every few seconds, and you don't keep it like that. So really, that's so that you can see that you did it competitively and win a competition, but you're not going to leave your computer. You can't leave your computer running like that. So really, 5.3 gigahertz out of the box is excellent, and I think the best, that by far the best you can get, but the best processor you can buy. But the expense of that is they had to turn up the power consumption significantly, which generates a lot more heat and uses a lot more electricity. And so you're talking about now in where the last generation, the 9900K on a task might be using 160 watts. This might be using 200 or 210 watts. You're talking that you're going to need a ridiculously expensive and good cooler for it to be able to really to get to that 5.3 gigahertz and that's not overclocked, just for it to know, okay, I can stay cool enough. Because in order to get there, it has to be under, I think, 70 degrees Celsius, which is not uh, well, that's hot for you to touch, but for a processor, it's not necessarily that super hot. So, uh, it's so this is a hot power drinking CPU, and you get the benefit of that in better performance. But you're going to need fantastic cooling. That's going to cost you some money, and I don't know how many people are really worried about their electric bill, but it's certainly going to use a bit more power. I mean, I'm always a little skeptical of these things where people are so concerned about the power. I mean, you should be concerned because you have to supply it with your power supply and because you've got to cool it. But as far as like, I mean, I'm not saying electricity should just be wasted, but I mean, the difference between like 160 watt CPU and a 200 watt CPU, I don't know if that's going to be a material difference over the course of a year in your electric bill. You have so much other stuff using electricity, both inside your PC and in your computer setup, like your monitor, and in your house, and like a few hundred, a few watts here and there probably isn't going to make a significant bump in your electric bill, but it is going to mean that you need a bigger power supply and better cooling, and that your motherboard is going to have to have VRMs, voltage regulation modules, that are really good to handle this. So that all adds up.
And do we know what the going price on this guy is?
Yeah, I said for $530.
Okay. Sorry, I missed that.
So Newegg has it right now for $529.
Okay.
And that's actually a good deal compared to what the old one was, because the old one was about the prior model, the 9900K, was about, I think, was just under 500. So not bad. And remember, you're getting more cores and more threads. You're getting 20 threads also. So that means, now, I mean, it has an official TDP, thermal design, of 125, but that thing can boost way, 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 way up. So, it is a big time power drinker. But on the other hand, if you want performance, you gotta, it's going to take some electricity to get there. AMD's top of the line Ryzen right now, the Ryzen 9 3900X, is about $500, and that has 105 watt TDP. So, and it has more threads and cores, 12 cores, 24 threads. That's for multitasking, for doing things like video editing and things like that. The cores and threads are more important. But so AMD definitely wins. And recently we did a face-off between AMD and Intel, and in most cases AMD is a much better value right now. But if you're throwing money and power consumption to the wind, like the Core i9-10900K will give you the best performance on gaming and the best performance on things that don't use a ton of threads. Once you get to that point of, hey, I'm doing Photoshop, I'm doing video editing, creative editing, 3D modeling, whatever, things that actually use a lot of cores and threads. Even your web browser uses some different core threads. So, you definitely benefit from having more cores and threads like AMD gives you.
For sure. And although with the weird spike in component prices right now, it does sound like this might be a surprisingly affordable processor comparatively, because over the last 10 days we've seen a pretty sharp spike in component prices, with some of the AMD processors being 700 plus right now. So that's but that's today. Who knows in another 10 days what it'll look like. But with our weird environment right now, we never know what to expect from minute to minute. So
Speaking of power consumption, I just want to mention something I'm working on that I think is going to be kind of fun. So it's not to say that I'm against looking into power consumption. I recently got sent. I'm starting to get sent a whole bunch of little tiny power adapters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to figure out how am I going to test them to make sure that they're actually delivering the amount of wattage that we want. And I got in the mail this thing here, which is a load tester, which is going to allow me to actually make sure that whatever if something is 65 watts, I'd make it draw 65 watts to see that it actually is getting what it's supposed to. So, I understand people wanting to make sure that, they're not wasting power.
Sure. Is that the product we were looking at? Or
yeah.
a product like what we were looking at?
I think so. I think
Awesome.
that's the one we were. I think that's the one we were looking at. I got work to order for me came in, so I'm eager to play with it. But I'm still waiting to get all my little power adapters to play with.
And I'm guessing the power adapters you're getting are all the GAN Tech ones.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So here I have one right over here. I can show people real quick. So this thing here from Aukey. This is a 65 watt thing to charge your laptop, right?
Crazy.
And it's super small. And they're sending me one that's actually smaller than this. That's supposed to be 61 watts, which honestly is plenty for most laptops. Yeah. So, but I think if you want to, actually make sure that it is 65 watts, or the other ones that other companies are sending me, that's where doing proper power testing comes in.
Well, that's super cool because I interviewed the guy who designed the GAN chips at CES this year.
Really?
Yeah, he was on our live show. So I'm super excited. He and I have talked back and forth. Obviously, he's heavily involved in the product design process as well, so that people can implement the thing that the company built. But yeah,
I'd like to talk to him.
Okay, I'll make it happen.
Yeah,
I'll make an intro.
That'll be interesting. Yeah, cool.
But yeah, that was a super fun conversation. We don't usually get to go that far into the weeds during the live show because we don't usually have component people on. So it was real fun to get down into the technical details and talk about the weirdness that makes it possible. So I have a vested interest in hearing how these things come out. Well, Avram, as always, I always love hearing about the stuff that you're working on, and I cannot wait to see how this comes out. And thanks for letting us know about the Intel stuff, and can't wait to find out what we talk about next.
Right.